Congratulations, David, on 30 years at the Center on the Legal Profession and on the tremendous impact you have had. I've recently come to learn that I was the first fellow of the Center on the Legal Profession. Spending that year at HLS, advised and supported by David, helped to launch me in my academic career. As all of you who know David will have witnessed, he's very enthusiastic about the people he admires. And I consider myself lucky that he was always so supportive and encouraging of me. I hadn't checked all the usual boxes that an aspiring academic might check, clerkship, law review, but none of that mattered to David's support for my ambitions. He appreciated my strengths and always championed them to others. He has a special ability to discern what each person can add to our profession and to help us to build that up.
I think that I probably wouldn't be a legal academic today if it hadn't been for working with David. And a lot of this is when I was a second and third year law student and I started working with David, I had this sort of weird mix of interests in critical legal studies and the legal profession and legal education in South Asia and law and philosophy. And I think a lot of people might have just sort of dismissed this as an incoherent collection of interests. But David was so enthusiastic when I'd go and talk to him about these things. And he really encouraged me to pursue these interests. And the way that he engaged made me see that I really could be a legal scholar, that I could work on these questions that I was interested in a way that was interesting for other legal academics.
Congratulations, David, on 30 years heading CLP. I admire so greatly what you have accomplished with CLP, and I've learned so much from you. You think about and communicate so brilliantly what are really the most pressing issues facing the global legal profession. But the center is far more than that. Through your thoughtfulness, through your humanity, you've built an organization, and even more importantly, built a community to explore and take on the challenges facing lawyers today. In my own career in public service, I've tried as best I can to learn from your leadership and mentorship. And I think one of the main lessons I've come away with from watching you is to try to seize onto something you care deeply about, and then inspire others to care deeply about it as well, and then go make a difference.
So David's leadership and mentorship has shaped my career in immeasurable ways. His work on the marginalization of Black lawyers in U.S. law firms underscores the importance of social networks and connections in professional careers, an insight he takes very seriously in his role at CLP. Signaling his deep commitment to praxis, David applies his theoretical and empirical expertise in the real world by generously mentoring students and by proactively connecting scholars and ideas from different corners of the academy and legal practice.
I wouldn't be where I am without David. In 2011, David set up a project at CLP that was called the GLEE Project, and he recruited a bunch of young scholars from the Global South to provide a comparative study of the changes in the corporate legal sectors in Brazil, India, and China in the wake of globalization. And that gave me the first opportunity to be involved in a major comparative and transnational project that became a key piece of my career, and I would say actually enabled me to participate in global academia to an extent that I wouldn't be able to without that project.
I joined the center as a postdoctoral fellow who launched the Globalization Lawyers and Emerging Economies project with David. The project is a great example of David's intellectual and academic leadership, and he has been a stellar mentor. He inspired me to develop my research in the field of emerging economies. Thank you, David, for inspiration. Thank you for the opportunity to work with you and the great time at the center.
I remember very clearly meeting David for the first time. I was a grad student. I was studying how law students think about their professional identities, and I was very intimidated to talk with him, but I remember that he was just so inviting and warm and welcoming. He even referred to me and some other people that I was working with as his peeps. That was just such a great sign of the kind of mentor he might be, and someone who really invites you into this field and also shows an interest in who you are as a person. Along the way, what he'll emphasize above all is encouraging you to do it your own way, to try your own ideas and to innovate. And what's most amazing is just that he genuinely delights in the surprising recipes that you create.
He offered me a job that enabled me to combine my past career in marketing and advertising for 7-8 years before law school with being a lawyer. And so using my marketing and my marketing background, understanding how to do behavioral research in terms of interviewing and also focus groups and bringing that to the center, but applying it to law, really jump-started my career and made me a whole person. Today, I wouldn't be the professor I am without that. Well, I wouldn't even be a professor without David's help, because he mentored me all along before I became a Komenko Fellow. But really, that marriage of my two careers has made me feel so complete. So I actually think David's the reason why I'm happy.
I've known David for more than 35 years. I met David in Madison in 1987 when I was a graduate student, and he was a brand new assistant professor at Harvard Law School. And he had come to Madison for some confab on law firms, which was overall a pretty stuffy event, except for every time David opened his mouth. He had this knack, even then, of being able to say direct and somewhat provocative things, but with warmth and candor and inclusiveness, so that even disagreements seemed very friendly and inviting of further conversation. And he was also so unsnobby.
Before returning to law practice, I spent decades in academia, and I can honestly say that David is among a very small handful of what I consider to be master lecturers. In the classroom, David engages, he energizes, and he inspires. For those of us that care deeply about Harvard Law School and the Center for the Legal Profession, we are very lucky indeed to have David in the classroom, in the office, and hopefully in our future for many years to come.
Meeting with David, working around with David at that time was very inspirational. And I still think about him and his career and his achievement in my daily life in my organization. Because what is very impressive and what is still sticking with me is not only the high level of achievement, but the scope of achievement, the large breadth, the broad scope of achievement of David.
I think he was more than a professor and more than a researcher and more than a teacher, but he was like a grandmaster. Basically, he was like a grandmaster Yoda or grandmaster Obi-Wan Kenobi for Luke. Basically, I mean, not only for the research, but also for my life, it really changed my view about what professor is about.
David's leadership is absolutely what has helped to launch my career, for sure. It is with a grant from the Center on the Legal Profession that I was able to do writing on access to justice during my time as a student at HLS. But more importantly, it was David's guidance and mentorship in cheerleading that really allowed for that to grow and to eventually be published, which has very much allowed for me to do the work that I've been doing both in legal aid as well as in the university space.
You know, there's no version of my life in the US that doesn't involve David. I knew him as a student. I actually knew him before I was a student because he was the reason I applied to law school in the United States. I knew him as a mentor when I was doing a PhD and I was affiliated with the center. I knew him as a fellow when I was working after my LLM as a fellow at the center. And over the years, I've known him as a colleague and as a close friend. And I think now I think of him as family. And all of these relationships are intertwined. All of these relationships sort of feed off of each other, but they're at the core at the ways in which David does leadership and mentoring. It's rooted in interpersonal connection. It's rooted in attention and understanding.
What are 3 words to describe David Wilkins? Enthusiastic, generous, serious.
Innovative, supportive, and collaborative.
He is not easily summarizable because he's more of a go big or go home type. But if I tried, it would be 1, visionary, 2, connector, like coalition builder, and 3, grit.
There are a lot of extremely positive words that would fit for this. The first 3 that came to mind for me were curiosity, enthusiasm, and camaraderie.
Busy, generous, and present.
Generosity, wisdom, and his just tremendously infectious spark to create and build together.
First of all, David is unbelievably charismatic. You can't resist David. I think maybe he should be famous, and he is in his own way in the legal profession. Second, David is brilliant. He is one of the smartest people I know. And third, loving.
Because he reminds me of President Obama. Yes, we can.
What are 3 words to describe working with David at the center? I have to say supportive, productive, and collaborative.
I'm only going to use 1 word if you allow me, and that's energizing.
David is brilliant, he is enthusiastic, and he is very generous.
What are 3 words I would use to describe working with David at the center? I don't know if I could do 3, but I could do 5. Everything, everywhere, all at once. With a bottle of wine. Okay, that's 8, but I think you'll appreciate it.
Thank you, David, for all your support and encouragement, as well as for all the fabulous meals.